Seth Leibson, Chris Buskirk. It's principles and politics. The Seth and Chris Show is on now.
Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show. Happy Friday, everybody. It's been a good week, and it's going to be an even better Friday as we roll into this weekend. A lot of fun this week. We're going to have quite a bit of fun today on the show as well. We're going to be taking your calls throughout the show. If you want to jump in early, 602-508-0960, just to preview some of the things we've got coming up. We're going to talk about Kathy Griffin. The train wreck keeps getting train wreckier. Or as a friend and mentor once told me, a rule that seems to escape Kathy Griffin. The first rule of holes is what? When you're in one, stop digging. And instead, Kathy Griffin seems to have be doing the precise opposite, which is she threw away the shovel, brought in a backhoe, trying to dig the hole deeper and deeper and deeper. She has confirmed, weirdly, that in her act going forward, she'll be taking direct aim not at Donald Trump, but at Barron Trump. The 11-year-old son of the president. That seems like a good idea. Good media, good media savvy deployed by Kathy Griffin there. But this is self-destruction. If you're wondering what a nervous breakdown in public looks like, see Kathy Griffin. At 4 o'clock, we will also be joined by Brandon Weichert. He is the co-author along with me of a new. I don't know maybe we'd call that an investigative piece at American Greatness. It is on the evolution of the Russia narrative. We call it the anatomy of a lie. We've talked a lot about it on this show over the past 6 months, really since the election. And Brandon and I decided to spend the time to actually go through and dig up the history piece by piece of how the Russia narrative started off last summer as a campaign narrative, basically your sort of run-of-the-mill campaign dirty trick, talking point, whatever you want to call it, a way to try and win the election for Hillary Clinton. It was something that was dreamed up inside the campaign in collusion. Yes, there's that word again, collusion with people inside the Obama administration, but it was really meant to be a closing argument of sorts. During the campaign. It was really meant as a September, October kind of October surprise type of a thing to try and undermine the public's trust in President Trump, then candidate Trump. And it didn't work. They did it. They had a very elaborate plan, and the article does go through, and you can see in the public press exactly where and how this happened. There's lots of citations, and then it just didn't work. People didn't care. They saw it for what it was. Donald Trump, of course, won the election, and then shortly thereafter, there was a next evolutionary step in the Russia story. There was so-called Russia, what became the Russian hacking narrative, then became the Russia collusion narrative, and it's sort of gone through these different permutations over time. But this has been something that has been in the works on the Democrat side for about a year now, and it changed then after the cases that Hillary Clinton and Jill Stein brought in federal court in 3 states. That was the next evolution. Then it went through a hacking narrative. Then it went through a collusion narrative, and now it's just a scandal and a crime in search of a fact, in search of not a crime, but a scandal and a punishment in search of a crime. We've talked about that a lot here, and that was really the genesis for writing this up. It's it's a sort of a long piece, but we thought we owed it to the public to really go through and do the research and do the history. There's probably 70 or 80 different links in the piece. There's also, we produced a 30-minute video that walks you through this step by step. But this is classic Democrat dirty tricks. This is the Alinskyite handbook, and I think it's interesting. We've been getting good feedback on it. We published it yesterday. Been getting good feedback because people say, "Wow, this is nobody's laid it out this way in this much detail before." Well, that was the point. You look like you want to say something.
Well, it's also in search of a fact, as you say, Chris, and I'm really glad you and Brenda did this. It's a public service. It's what real journalism should have been, rather than what CNN and the New York Times are doing and the Washington Post are doing, which is a drip. Every day's a new story about Russia, never connected to the denials or the refutals. from the day, the week, the month before, when things are looked into, you get this, what would you call it, perfect storm that creates a narrative that there's something wrong with the Trump administration and the Trump election and Russia, and it's just put in the air. What you do is you break down the molecules, and you've shown for anyone in the public who wants to read it how the narrative began, what each charge has been, the falseness of each charge, and how it turns into a tale told by an idiot signifying nothing, if I can borrow from Shakespeare. This is real journalism, and I'm really glad you and Brandon did it, and it's a public service.
Yeah, so Brandon will be joining us at 4 o'clock. Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show, penultimate hour of the ultimate show of the week. That means it is 4:06, and as promised, we're joined by Brandon Weichert. He is the proprietor of the WeichertReport.com. He is a friend of the show, and he is also the author of The Anatomy of a Lie. It's a story that we published today on, or actually last night, at American Greatness, which I think is the definitive history of the evolution of the Russia narrative, how it started off basically as a political dirty trick in the Clinton campaign with aiding and abetting from the Obama administration, and how it has evolved into a media narrative that has consumed the press for the past 6 months. It is what I like to describe as a punishment in search of a crime. Brandon, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm okay, and thanks for having me on. And I'd like to make one correction. I go by the title of The Big Cheese of the Weichert Report. So, but aside from that, I am doing well.
The big cheese, not the head cheese, but the big cheese. I like it.
I like to have a little humility there.
A little. I mean, you can overdo even that.
That's right. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Brandon. Look,
Good.
Brandon, you did a ton of work on this story. It's really fantastic. It's getting a lot of press. I don't know if you've noticed that yet. It's getting a lot of what I call virality. I don't know if maybe that's a word I made on social media.
Good word.
But it's getting good comments on places like Instapundit, Powerline Blog, and a number of other places, and is getting a lot of traction. Why? Because it is, I think, the definitive history of this story, which shows that it is that basically it's a phony story. It is something cooked up in the bowels of the Democrat Party. Why don't you talk about maybe a little bit of maybe just lay out what the argument is. How lay out not the argument, but the history. And by the way, I want to point out for people if they want to see this, it's at American Greatness, amgreatness.com. Included in there is, and you did a great job on this, Brandon, is a video. It's a 30-minute video that really documents really well. It has all the clips, it has all of the citations, it's got everything, so you can read it. There's a ton of links. There's all the information there. And plus, I think this video is just very, very well done. And is highly shareable. Hint, hint.
Well, thank you for the kind words. And at the end of the video, I provided my email because if anybody ever questions me, I always say I have all the links, all the citations that anybody could want, because I'm a big believer in having the facts. But I think actually the reason this is possibly the best definitive version is because I spent a very long time fact-checking and verifying and double verifying, because there's a lot of BS out there about what exactly happened. And basically, the storyline here is very simple. During the contentious 2016 primary, the Never Trump Republicans, I heard the ending of your last hour dinging Mitt Romney, rightfully so, but people like him went out and they paid a former MI6 agent who was a Russia specialist to go out and dig up dirt on Donald Trump. And
Can I pause you right there?
Yeah.
They, right? That's the pronoun. They paid. Who do we think?
Yes.
Who do we think paid?
Well, I don't know explicitly who, but I have an idea. It is that I know it's the Never Trump crowd. I could be, I don't know. I don't want to speculate because I do not know.
Yeah.
But I do. Let's just say I wouldn't be surprised if it's people associated with, say, Bill Kristol or, the group that tried to get Evan McMullin to run, and that whole Never Trump crowd. I'm of the mind, I don't really care who exactly did it. The problem is it's a large group, and they thankfully used to, not anymore, but they used to have considerable pull in the upper echelons of the Republican Party, and that's the problem. But in 2016, they paid Christopher Steele to go to Russia, well, actually to call on his quote-unquote sources in Russia.
Another question here, Brandon Bennett. I don't mean to keep interrupting, but I want to just dwell on this point for a second. Do you have any idea how much he was paid, Christopher Steele?
No, but I can. I used to work on campaigns. I used to do Oppo research.
What do you think would be the zip code of what type of? Are we talking?
For what he did,
yeah.
I would say it was considerable. I don't know. I don't know for what he was paid, but it was considerable. Because
would you think it's a 5-figure number or a 6-figure number?
Yeah.
A 5-figure number.
Put it this way: it was good enough whereby he approached James Comey himself months after he produced the dossier, and after the primary ended. He approached Jim Comey while Comey was in Italy at a conference, and he directly handed Comey a copy of the dossier. He was attempting to ingratiate himself with U.S. intelligence because in October, as I note in the video, in October of 2016, Comey was in negotiations with Steele to bring him on as a paid consultant leading the investigation from the outside as a consultant, leading the investigation into Trump's supposed nefarious Russian ties. And of course, the deal never went through because even the elements of the intelligence community and the Obama administration could not justify that expense. So Steele was obviously getting paid well enough by the RNC or by elements within the Republican Party. When the money train stopped after the primary, he went directly to Comey and was trying to get money from Comey and the FBI. That's how much he enjoyed the payday from. He wanted to continue.
Yeah, right. Did he, as far as you understand it, was he doing Oppo research during the primaries, or did it start afterwards?
Yeah. My understanding is it was. I believe it was. I believe it may have even been March of 16. He was hired by a Never Trump group to that, and the rumor was that they were associated with Ted Cruz, but don't hold me to that because I'm trying to confirm that they were. But they were. It was a Never Trump group that hired him, and he went out and called his old. He in the 1990s worked for MI6 in Moscow, so he supposedly called his contacts in Russia. And if you actually read the dossier as it was presented in BuzzFeed, it was nothing. And I noted this in the article and in the movie. It was nothing more than salacious innuendo and rumor. There was absolutely no verification. And when he handed this off to Comey, and then when McCain handed off the same memo or dossier to Comey just accepted this at face value. He did not. Nobody in the intelligence community questioned the sources and methods that Steele used. It was insane. I've never heard of this, where it was just taken at face value, and that was that. And that leads me to believe that there obviously was political elements within the intelligence community, either loyal to Barack Obama or possibly Bush appointees who were just opposed to Donald Trump, who were pushing this thing through. The different intelligence community, the different agencies of the IC. And it was never really questioned. It was just taken at face value, which, I mean, I was reminded when I was reading this of, the 2003 WMD and Iraq claims, where everybody just took curveball the Iraqi information, the Iraqi guy that the Germans had, who was claiming that he knew for a fact there were, biological and other WMD in Iraq. And, of course, it turned out the guy was fabricating most of it. And nobody was questioning him. Nobody was questioning the sources and methods. It was the same thing with this story on Trump. Nobody dared question Steele's sources
because
and
they
methods.
wanted to believe it. They wanted to be able. They wanted to use it as a cudgel against Trump.
That's right. And as I noted in the article, if in the case of Brennan, because it started really with Comey, and then July, August of 16 is when Brennan really got involved in terms of looking into not just Trump's business connections, but the Trump campaign officials like Manafort and Carter Page. Brennan stepped in and started looking into their connections with Russia.
This is the ex-CIA chief,
yes.
John Brennan, just for people who are listening.
Yes, and it was confirmation bias. That's all it was. There was absolutely no verifiable evidence, and it's very telling that ever since 2016, when all the different intelligence community heads have been repeatedly testifying, each time they're asked point blank, they have said that there is no verifiable connection between either Donald Trump and Russia in terms of illicit connections, or between any of the Trump campaign people like Roger Stone, like Paul Manafort, like Carter Page. There's nothing. There's nothing there. It's smoke and mirrors.
Brandon, hold it there. We're going to go to a break. Sure. When we come back, we can flesh this out a bit more. Brandon Weichert is my guest, talking about an excellent new piece called "The Anatomy of a Lie: The Evolution of the Russia Story." We will be right back after this.
West Virginia, the Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. Life is old.
Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show. It's a little Bon Jovi bringing us back, right, Seth? Right.
Something this station will always do.
Brandon, you recognized that clearly as a Bon Jovi hit parade, didn't you?
Yeah. Sure,
yeah, right, sure, because I know what I'm talking about. Anyway, just Brandon Weichert's our guest, talking about new piece. It's Friday afternoon, Brandon. What can we say?
Right.
Talking about a great new piece. This is the definitive history of the evolution of the Russian narrative, starting back last spring, I guess it was, spring of 16, maybe early summer. Brandon, we'd really just gotten to the point. I want to just kind of rewind a little bit here. We've just gotten to the point where Christopher Steele, this ex-MI6 agent who had worked in Moscow, was paid by somebody. We don't know for sure who, but he was certainly paid by somebody to dig up dirt on Donald Trump to come, and he came up with the craziest dossier. This is the dossier that was passed to. There was a dossier passed to John McCain. There was one that was given to James Comey, and it had these crazy allegations about Donald Trump hiring Russian prostitutes to urinate on a bed in Moscow. Why? Because Barack Obama had once slept in it. Right? I mean, this is what this guy was paid good money to do. We don't know who paid him, but it was somebody or some group of somebody's associated with Republican politics. Is that fair?
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Interesting. I mean, you would love to know who that was. I mean, there was this. I have a hard time just getting past this. Somebody paid good money for that.
Well, I have some ideas, but I don't want to speculate. I just
understood.
I have been at the grassroots levels of campaigns going back to when I turned 18. I went back to 2006. I have seen a lot of Oppo research, and I've seen it all. And Republican primaries can be very vicious. So it's not surprising that something like this happened. What is surprising is the way that this transferred from being nothing more than petty politics as usual into being a full-blown intelligence community investigation, counterintelligence investigation, as well as a potential constitutional crisis.
Right.
That's the part that just really that's disgusting is what it is.
Agreed. So in terms of the chronology, so we're back now. We're just really at the beginning of this story. So we're back basically last summer. Okay. So now, how does this? We're talking about, we've got Michael. I want to say Michael Steele, Christopher Steele, being hired by some group. He digs up this dossier. Now we've got the Clinton campaign. We've got the Clinton campaign at this point still thinking they're going to win, trying to figure out a way in their mind, basically just to pull past Donald Trump and be done with it and win the election. Right. Where do they come in here?
In terms of the Clinton campaign, they come in the sense that they are simply trying to ignore and obfuscate about their own actual corruption. in terms of the Clinton Global Initiative, where there was potential of pay-to-play scheme going on, going back to when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. She was basically selling access to herself in the form of getting donations to her quote-unquote charitable foundation, and then also in the sense that while she was Secretary of State, she was using an unguarded, unprotected server to conduct classified business, and it is believed that server and to the people that she was emailing to were all compromised by foreign intelligence agents and hackers and God knows who else. And, of course, she was saying that there's no there, and they were trying to figure out ways to distract the press and basically just roll over their opponents. And as that was going on, they were also conspiring with Debbie Wasserman Schultz at the DNC to rig the election, the DNC primary, against poor old Bernie Sanders and in Hillary's favor. And so she had her own actual corruption going on, her own actual, I know that James Comey said it wasn't he couldn't prosecute what she did, but I actually think that was...
Of course he could. Of course he could.
Yes.
I mean, a point about James Comey that's not made in this essay because it was really sort of beyond the scope, but interesting nonetheless is that James Comey was the Senate counsel in the Whitewater investigation and let the Clintons off then too.
Yeah, and as I've written at American Greatness, I've had an axe to grind with James Comey going back to the Bush years because he was the reason why, whether you agree with it or not, he, yet again, decided to take it upon himself to fundamentally rewrite administration policy back in the Bush years when he was given temporary, I think it was for a very short period of time, temporary control over the Justice Department when he was the deputy AG, when his boss, John Ashcroft, had pancreatitis. And rather than being a responsible steward of the office, he decided to countermand the Bush administration's surveillance program, and he unilaterally ended it and caused a huge row that got into the press and fundamentally altered the way that the Bush administration was conducting itself. Now, I'm not commenting on the morality of the surveillance program, but what I'm saying is, as Rod Rosenstein pointed out in his memo about Comey's conduct toward the Clintons with the July 2016 press conference, Comey oversteps his role. He oversteps his boundary. He thinks that he's the master of the universe or something, and this goes back to the Bush years. It's unbelievable. It's inappropriate, and it's inexcusable. And he absolutely should have recommended that further investigation be done into Hillary when he made that press conference in July. But he was covering for her. I think you're right. There is a connection there between himself and the Clintons, certainly at least an affinity.
Yeah, I mean, there's a 20-plus year history. I mean, he has let the Clintons off of serious criminal charges twice now. Twice.
Right.
And I don't know, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Absolutely. Well, and lest we forget, Comey's boss, the then Attorney General Loretta Lynch, was a Clintonoid as well, and she had that private meeting with Bill Clinton on the tarmac of the airport in Arizona, and they supposedly just discussed grandkids. But I mean, look, I worked in bureaucracy long enough to know, and it doesn't take long to learn this, how applying political pressure works. You don't ever come out and say you're applying political pressure. There's always an inference. There's always an innuendo, and that's exactly what that meeting with Loretta Lynch. Maybe they did just discuss, Bill Clinton and her just discussed grandkids, but the image of Bill Clinton meeting with Loretta Lynch in private, that is enough to send a message to anybody in the DOJ. Hey, we got to back off investigating the Clintons.
Well, and you remember who was providing security, right, on the tarmac? It was it was the FBI.
Oh, well, there you go. It's not surprising at all. I think actually it makes sense because she was the AG. That makes perfect sense. Well, it's just I mean the real scandals here are on the left, and yet the media and the DNC are obfuscating and they're deflecting about the real scandals between the Clinton Global Initiative, the Clinton email server, and then the Obama administration's unmasking of Trump campaign officials that were collected incidentally in surveillance on Russian.
Incidentally, incidentally,
Yeah.
but let's come back on that point. I want to come back basically in the summer of 16, leading into the fall, where the Clintons and the Obamas picked up on this Russia idea, and then we can go from there, get to the election, and then after that, Brandon Weichert's my guest. We'll be right back.
I'm burning, I'm burning for you. I'm burning, I'm burning for you.
They all laughed at Christopher Columbus when he said the world was round. They all laughed when Edison
I don't care what Seth says, that is not Bon Jovi. That is the hoodlum from Hoboken, Frank Sinatra. Brandon Weichert is our guest. He's no hoodlum. He is, in fact, somebody who's doing the heavy lifting that journalists used to do at places like the Washington Post and the New York Times. They don't do that anymore, so they leave it to us. But you know what? That's okay. We're up to it.
Just don't call me a journalist, please. I was.
That's right. I like you too much, Brandon. I would never do that.
I was at an event a few weeks ago out here in D.C., and I asked a question of a Chinese Communist Party official, and he referred to me as a journalist, and I promptly told him that you have just said the most hurtful thing that I can imagine about me. I am most certainly not a journalist. I'm an analyst at best.
I remember I said you were doing the work of a journalist, the work that journalists used to do, not that you are a journalist. That would imply a number of other things, like an itinerant, peripatetic lifestyle, unpaid bills, and a drinking problem.
Well, not yet, at least.
Right. You're right. There's still time to develop all of those things, and you know what? Just as your parents probably told you, if you put your mind to it, I'm sure you can do it. Brandon, this piece of it really is a piece of I don't know. It's more than just analysis. It really is an historian's work here to show how how a lie travels. Really, so we get to the summer and fall of 2016. The Clinton campaign, the Democrat Party, the DNC, the outside groups, and the Obama administration, it appears, now get invested into this lie about Russian collusion with regards to the Trump campaign. How did that happen?
Well, actually, if you really, the Obama administration was definitely married to this idea. I would argue going back into probably March of 2016, when the first DNC hacks started occurring, the hacks into the DNC servers, and then the slow drip of leaks about those hacks into the press going into the summer of 2016 in the build-up to the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. The Hillary Clinton campaign, the thing about the Clinton campaign is they were not really perpetuating the narrative of Trump-Russia collusion until she lost. It wasn't really until she lost that suddenly the Clintonoids jumped on board the Obama administration's narrative of painting this picture that Trump is a Kremlin stooge. But the Clinton campaign was so hapless that they never actually came up with a concerted narrative early on about these claims, these Christopher Steele claims. I thought that was the most interesting thing, is that they couldn't even do character assassination right on the Clinton team. They just, they were focusing on the war on women. They were focusing on, these other kind of shibboleths that the left loves. But the big story that the Obama team was trying to push with the Christopher Steele memo in particular was, hey, look, there's this, this threat of Russia. Why don't we make this a political issue and make it a cudgel to hit the Republicans over the head with in the campaign? And the Clinton campaign was kind of hapless about picking that up and running with it until it was too late.
They tried it and it just didn't get any traction.
Right, no, you're right. They did it. They were hapless. They were hapless is how I would describe it.
Yeah, I mean, it's partially it is the maybe it's the messaging and the messenger, but also the claim just is unbelievable, except to
Well, it
people who already want to believe it.
Well,
right?
Chris, the more that I read, and the reason that this took me 2 weeks to do, because when you called me, it was I think 2 weeks ago when you asked if I wanted to take part in this, and I did, and I thought, okay, this would be a 3-day, easy research operation. Just go in and do it, and then maybe do a 2-minute video. But as I dug into it, it became so convoluted that I had to sit there and basically parse out what gelled with what I knew and with other research that I had that was more verifiable. And you quickly realize that, my God, this is a literal lie. This is a complete fabrication that has been blown up. As I said earlier in the interview, it's been blown up from a simple campaign, back and forth, deal to now being a full-blown potential, constitutional crisis. And it's unbelievable how this has evolved, because it's just not true. I would say 80 to 90% of this is based on pure lies, and then the rest is based on baseless innuendo and guilt by association, which is not the way that you're supposed to conduct congressional inquiries and intelligence community investigations. It's supposed to be a higher threshold.
Brandon, we're going to a break. When we come back, we're at the election now. This morphs into these lawsuits that go to federal court that get tossed out, and then we wind up with these claims that are being made after those get tossed out. Let's pick up at that point after this break with Brandon Weichert. Thanks very much.
Rock and roll to me.
On the hand may be quite continental, but diamonds are a girl's best friend. A kiss.
Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show, joined by Brandon Weichert. Brandon is the author of an excellent essay on American greatness right now, The Anatomy of a Lie. You can find it at www.amgreatness.com. It explains in very, very great detail the evolution of the Russia narrative. Started off as basically as a campaign meme, a campaign narrative to try and just engage in some good old-fashioned character assassination against Donald Trump, and has morphed over time. So let me just ask you this. I want to talk about what happened after the election, Brandon, but what if you were to try and explain it to the layman, what is the specific claim that's being made by people pushing what I call the Russian narrative? What exactly do you think they're saying happened, and how do you think that accusation has changed over time?
So what they're saying is that it's, like I said, it's basically the claims that were made in the Steele dossier have now become the official kind of reasoning behind the investigation into Trump and his top people. Basically, the claim is that Trump has been compromised by Russian intelligence, FSB. The claim is that he, whether it was engaging the Russian women of the night to micturate upon the bed in Moscow or whatever, the claim is that the Moscow Ritz-Carlton is notoriously bugged, and that there is video of him engaging in this and other illicit activities while in Moscow that the FSB now has. There's also evidence they're claiming of improper financial dealings between the Trump organization and Russian-owned entities. And then they're also saying, in terms of the Trump people like Paul Manafort, like Carter Page, that they are actually Russian agents of influence because they've had illicit business dealings and contact with Russian agents and Russian businesses. And so those are kind of the big claim. They're saying that together this is forming a kind of a strategic lever that Putin is using to influence the Trump administration, or could potentially influence the Trump administration into making decisions that would basically turn him into a Manchurian candidate, where he's doing things to hurt American interests that benefit Vladimir Putin. All of this is based on innuendo and lies. There's virtually no truth behind any of these claims. And that is why every time you see, for instance, John Brennan before Congress, they will ask him directly if there was any evidence, actionable evidence linking either Trump or his people to Russia in a negative way. He short circuits. He has this facial tic he does where he starts twitching and getting shifty and uncomfortable and then he says no. And every one of the intelligence chiefs say the same thing. No, there's no definitive proof, but we'll talk about it more in classified briefings. But I guarantee you, when they get down to the cube, he's saying the same thing. There's nothing more to it. I guarantee you, there's nothing more to it.
Yeah, right, and they're all on the record. Brennan and the other people. Right, everybody is on the record when they were being asked by Congress.
If there was something there, let me tell you something. If there's something really there,
it would be out by now.
It would be out by now, given the fact they've been investigating this since spring of 2016. Trust me, it would be out.
Right. If there's a smoking gun, that would be out because that is the news. This is what they're attempting to do is just governed by lies and innuendo because you don't have to prove innuendo. You just put it out there, get it out into the atmosphere, and then worst case scenario. I think the Democrats are thinking that this plays in the 2018 elections. That's their worst case.
So
I think.
Yeah, that's what you're right. That's exactly well for the elected Democrat, for the DNC. Yes, that is exactly what this is. For the intelligence community, I think it's important to note that, and I get a lot of flack for this. I am a defender of the idea of the intelligence community. I do think that you can't just cast a wide, aspersion on the IC. I think this is the actions of a handful of highly placed Obama and potentially even never Trump Bush people who are perpetuating these lies. I don't think it's indicative of the entire IC. But this is part of a larger problem in that because the U.S. government itself is so bloated and big, you have no real ability for accountability. There's no real oversight because there can't be, especially when it comes to intelligence, because when you have this entity that's so large and it's so secretive by nature, they're going to have elements within that bureaucracy that are doing things that run counter to the elected officials running the country because they're entrenched interests or because they feel threatened by Trump in this case. It's a very bad thing. I wish that the Trump administration would focus on really refining the intelligence community and maybe cutting it down in size, and then really focusing in on getting rid of some of those lifers who have been there, who are lifelong Democrats, or at least people who are wedded to the status quo, to the point that they're going to actually work against the will of the people by working against the elected leader in office, in this case, Trump.
Yeah, there's a lot there, Brandon. I mean, my guess, and it is just that, having read all the same things that you've read, my guess is that the leakers, the people providing these anonymous quotes, and their memories of glimpsed memoranda that they provide to places like the New York Times and the Washington Post. My guess is that they're very highly placed people.
Nixon used to say, the little people do not leak. It's always somebody high up because the little people are too concerned. Look, I have friends. I have friends I went to my master's program with who are now involved with the community, and they're way too low level and worried about their jobs to even worry about politics. It's the people at the top who've been there for so long that they feel entitled and that they feel like they're untouchable. And that's the problem. And that's why we need to the Trump team really needs to get in there and start refining the way and redoing the way that bureaucracy is managed. But that's up to them, unfortunately.
It's interesting, is it not, Brandon? I mean, the irony is rich. Over the past 40 years or more, even, we've been treated to I don't even know how many movies and television shows in which this exact scenario plays out, which is you have rogue elements within the CIA or the intelligence community that undermine the American president, but it's always the other way around in the movies. It's always Republicans or conservatives doing it to the righteous Democrat.
Well,
in fact,
the most recent season of Homeland was all about that.
Right. I mean, this is. But in practice, I say this all the time. If you ever want to know what Democrats are really going to do or what they are actually doing, look at what they accuse other people of doing. They are supremely good at projection.
Well, and look at who they hate also. Whenever the left hates somebody, I start to really like that person. So, they hated Sarah Palin in 2008, and automatically I liked her because I knew that meant that she was effective. You know, they hated Donald Trump, and automatically that just made me like him even more because that meant he was effective. That meant that he was a real threat to them. And anybody that threatens the orthodoxy of the left is going to get my vote any day of the week.
Brandon, we're coming up against another break, then we've got one more short segment. But in that segment, just think about this. I mean, so we've kind of covered the waterfront here. We didn't really talk about what happened right after the election, the lawsuits, but I've covered that in detail on the show in the past.
And it's in the article and in the video.
Yeah, it's in the article and the video. I want to talk about where we think this goes from here. So just think about that as we go to this break. Brandon Weichert is the guest. We'll be right back.
In the personal columns, there was this letter I read. If you like pina coladas and getting caught in the rain, if you're not into yoga, if you have half a brain, if you like making love at midnight, true like the sun coming up each morning, bright as the light in a bay.
Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show. Final segment with Brandon Weichert. If you want to check out his piece, and I highly recommend that you do, on the anatomy of a lie, the evolution of the Russian narrative. You can find it at American Greatness. That's www.amgreatness.com. Also there, it posted along with the piece is really, I think, a top-notch video that you put together, Brandon, that lays this all out. Brandon, we've seen this story evolve over the past really a year, maybe a little bit more than a year now, and it's taken on a bit of a life of its own in terms of, we now have the special prosecutor, we've got an FBI investigation, all these things. All of these things are meant really to undermine the president. The Democrats and quite honestly, some of the Republicans don't want him to be effective. This is not really about finding a crime that was committed, because I think everybody knows there wasn't one. This is about raw political power. Where do you think it goes from here?
Well, it's one of two ways. The cynic or pessimist in me is saying the Republicans in Congress will find a way to ruin Trump, whether they mean to or not. But then the optimist in me, which is I'm leaning more toward this angle, is that while the Republicans did subpoena the 4 Trump campaign people, they're going to find that there's nothing there, and so we're not going to go beyond this. So the media is going to keep trying to make it about them. They also, the Republicans, subpoenaed Samantha Powers, Susan Rice, and forgive me, I'm forgetting the third person from the Obama National Security Team, but they I think it was John Brennan or Comey, I can't remember now, but they subpoenaed 3 Obama national security people who were all involved potentially with unmasking. Well, we know that Susan Rice was, but all 3 were believed to be involved with unmasking. And I would not be surprised if the investigation goes more toward that direction, because there's actual evidence suggesting that the top-tier Obama people were involved in illegally unmasking, that they did change the rules on January 12, 2017, right before Obama left office, that designed to, quote, spread around, according to Evelyn Farkas, all of the materials that had been gathered on the Trump campaign team over the year to as many parts of the intelligence community as possible, whereby they were then leaked anonymously to the press at strategic times. So this is, I think the investigation is going to follow that, and I think this could actually end up being Watergate in reverse, where it blows up heavily on the Democrats. This is the kind of thing that not only could mar the Democratic Party for at least a generation, this is the kind of thing that could seriously destroy or undermine Obama's legacy, which is good for me. I'm fine with that either way. So I say bring it on.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, this may wind up blowing up in the Democrats' faces. It certainly should. The leaking that has been done is illegal. Big league, right? Big league. Right. Yeah, I think that's right. We need to watch this closely, because I think the Democrats have once again overplayed their hand. Brandon Weichert, thanks so much for spending the hour with us, and thanks so much for the hard work. Very much appreciate it. We'll be right back after this.
up or down. From rats on up to riches, 15 minutes you can fly. Pretty blue lights along the way help you right on by. And the blue lights shining with a heavenly grace help you right on by. There ain't no road just like it anywhere I found. Running south on Lakeshore Drive, getting into town, just slipping on by on LSD, fighting that trouble bound. And it starts up north from Hollywood, water on the driving side. Concrete mountains rearing up, throwing shadows just about 5. Sometimes you can smell the green if your mind is feeling fine. There ain't no finer place to be than running Lakeshore Drive. And there's no peace of mind the place you see riding on Lakeshore Drive.